I heard through the grapevine, Abdi, that after your appearance with me on Fox News, you got some pushback. You got maybe even a little hatred. What was the reaction in your community among Somalis?
It was mostly threat. It was mostly unbelievable. I mean, I've received. It got to a point where I had to call the police chief in my town, which is where I live in Yarma. Uh, you might be wondering why was there a backlash, a pushback? The main accusation, believe it or not, is that it's a secret. Don't tell it. And I didn't back down. I said I will speak freely. I'm a free country, and so I've been called the American spy. I wish that's a great title, but I'm not. I've been called spying on my own community. It's really been annoying. I mean, I think this is it makes me happy to be one of. I also have received positive feedback from small members of the community who are tired of the clan rivalry, tired of this system of coercion where we just stick together wherever we are. Let's never leave Somalia or the name Somali, which is kind of ridiculous. And nobody's living it, but it's okay to adopt. It's okay to grow, right? And that is not generally what I see in the community. So, yeah, it's really turned into a real life threatening moment. It went viral. It has reached my mother, who's in Somalia as we speak, that she had to flee from where she was to a different place and keep moving around for the last week or so, which is terrifying. And I knew this was coming. You know, but it really just becomes sickening to me. And so I appreciate you having me on your show and speaking truth.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to speak the truth, especially given such personal cost. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that your mother is having to move around in Somalia, that the segment we did together, the conversation that we had on Fox News, made its way back to Somalia, and it's forced your mother to move around from village to village?
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only my mother lives with my sister. And they're living on the outskirts, so they've been locally displaced, what they call IDPs, internally displaced for a while. So they live together as a community, right? And everybody has a cell phone these days, so everybody has access to TikTok or anywhere else. And when people found out that I was on your show, and talking up, not exposing, talking truth about issues in my community, all the bad ones, all the ones who really wanted things to stay the way they are, I've purposefully spread uh, the information and making me look like a spy in my own community, espionage, in my own community, attacking my own community. And, as ridiculous as that is, it reached everywhere that they framed it as if I was attacking my own community, which is not new. I've faced this many, many years ago, and it has always made me stronger and got me a whole lot of people follow, where we're going. And to me, I just see it as a way of changing this community because we can never, we don't have to be stuck in this situation. I heard President Trump's words, garbage, everything else. It makes me think, and I think this is the way it should be. It makes me think, why don't we look at ourselves, right? And say, okay, whether the president is right or wrong, it's that time that we have to think of welfare fraud, Section 8 fraud, autism fraud, that my community is heavily involved. Nobody's talking about it. It's hush. And for those who speak up are the same ones. I get attacked, and so anybody who speaks up also get attacked. And not only an attack, it becomes a threat. And we know in Somalia, anybody can come up and put a bullet in your head and walk away, and there is literally no system as we speak right now that can go ahead and bring somebody to justice. So I speak up because I'm a natural United States citizen right now, and I know they cannot mess with me at the moment. Physically, I live in a place where I feel like at least safe with cameras all around. But to the point where my mom had to flee and run around, it's just ridiculous, and it makes my community even look worse.
Are you concerned for your mother?
I am, absolutely, really am, and I have been for a long time.
What
Well,
is
she asked
incredible
me
to me, we of
if I
course were
could be
talking.
quiet. Go ahead. Sorry.
She asked you if you could be quiet.
Yeah.
She asked you if you could be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say?
Uh, I said that's more like a betrayal. Yeah. Imagine. I mean, do I live in the United States or somewhere else? Right? What 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 do we define if someone gets silenced speaking truth? Right? And so to me, it's just doing justice, I guess. And I also understand why my mother would be concerned. And so I didn't back down, but I have had some advice for her. And she found a small circle of community that actually supports the way I think. And so as of now, nothing bad has happened, and knock on the wood.
We were speaking to Abdi Iftin, a Somali-American refugee who spoke with me a little over a week ago on the Fox News channel. The purpose of the conversation at that time was to explore the fraud, notably in Minnesota, but also now cropping up in states like Maine or Ohio, tied to the Somali community, Somali-Americans, Somalian refugees, guilty of committing welfare fraud, autism fraud, feeding our families fraud, housing fraud. And what's fascinating to me, Abdi, about your initial answer and the reaction that you got from your community was, yes, in part about some of what you had to say about assimilation, some of what you had to say about the culture within your community. But what's fascinating in your first answer to me here today is the first thing that you heard was be quiet, stop telling secrets. In short, protect the racket, protect the fraud.
Correct. Yeah, seriously. I'll tell you an interesting story. I grew up in Somalia, and I was a huge fan of American movies. That's literally where I learned my English. And it was around the time when the United States was in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there was obviously a massive narrative that was going against the United States. And my nickname at the time was American, because I just thought it was fun, you know. And I came face to face, less than feet away, with a guy who's covered his face more like the ISIS Al Qaeda style, and I knew the gentleman because I grew up there, and Islamist movements just emerged. And he comes up to me and he says, "I know you, you know me. I want you to drop that nickname, America. Gone. Okay? If not, I'm gonna come back tomorrow and we'll take your life." Literally, that's what he said. I even wrote it in my memoir, "Call Me American," which is also a book that I wrote. To me, that was a moment that I could be bullied to back down from the United States, or the appreciation that I have for the country in general. I mean, you could hate certain people, but the idea of America is a brilliant, beautiful idea. And that I don't see that in my refugee community, in my immigrant community. And surprisingly, when I came to the United States, I came here immediately moonwalking, lyrics and all that, the American culture that I have adopted, pop culture. Nobody here really appreciated that in my community. Maybe one or two, but majority, they just looked at me and looked down on me and said, "Dude, you know, get over it." And I said, "Well, if I really want to thrive in this country, it's not Republican or Democrat to me. It's just the way I see this. It's such a exciting thrill, right? To really drive your own pickup truck. It's an American thing, right? Go out, hike, and honestly, one time I said, 'Hey, I feel more safe here than where I was born,' and that's true. And you could find, and I found some people who disagree with that. It's like, no, it's horrible. If you go out in the wilderness of Maine, pretty white, conservative, you could get kidnapped and you get killed, and that hasn't happened. And I'm a huge hiker. I, maybe there's one or two people who just generally hate Somali or anybody. I don't care, but predominantly if you approach people with smile and appreciation and love, we have a lot of things in common. And I think this idea of America should be the common idea that we will all appreciate. And I unfortunately didn't see that in a lot of my community. It's just this circle where we feel like we're here temporarily. I'm not even making this up. A lot of people who are naturalized citizens, you see the idea of stealing money from the American taxpayer, investing that money in Kenya or Somalia. The nearest place in Somalia that most people from Somalia live is in Kenya. So you see that money going back there. And instead of, even if you steal money, hey, invest in your own community in this country. That maybe at least like you're doing some favor, I guess, right? If not, then taking money and going all the way back. This whole idea of we're here temporarily, not permanently, is not what I buy. And I was not born here. I did not grow up here. I arrived here at an older age. And I really like to thrive in this idea of I want to be here permanently. I will not be taken down or demoralized by white supremacists, right? How many white supremacists are there? There might be some, but I I feel more welcome, honestly, here than anywhere else I've lived.